How's it going, guys? And welcome back to BL3's Forgotten, the series where I take a look at underused and not often talked about pieces of gear to determine whether or not they deserve to be remembered within the modern meta of the game or should be left behind and forgotten. And today we are taking a look at the Night Flyer. If you'd like to get the Night Flyer for yourself, you're going to want to fast travel over to Carnivora on Pandora, running your way all the way through until you hit the big open desert section, where upon entering you will activate a save station. From there, you're going to want to catch a ride and drive over across the desert towards the rack signal, entering the cave to take out Rackman, who can drop you the Night Flyer. The Night Flyer is a legendary Dahl pistol. It cannot roll with any elements, and fires in a 2-round burst. However, if you're in the air, the gun becomes full auto. Damage from the Night Flyer also stomps once an enemy hits 1 HP, at which point they become fully immune to damage from this gun. Before getting into the gun itself, I want to take this opportunity to say that while I understand why they changed rare spawns to have a 100% spawn chance, especially Rackman, considering you have to drive across this entire fucking desert, I think they should have left Rackman alone. It makes the rack signal Easter egg so much less cool than it used to be, because as it used to be, the rack signal would only appear if he was actively there, which means Rackman didn't even really have this issue that the other rare spawns did, because he tells you if he's there the second you load into the map. And while sure it was maybe a little bit annoying still, I think this small amount of annoyance is worth how cool it can be to notice the rack signal for the first time. Now, coming to the gun and getting it out of the way early, this gun looks fucking awesome. The skin is solid, but what really sells it is just the excessive amount of accessories, which is actually kind of surprising for me because I'm usually not a huge fan of that on some of the other legendaries. But I think it looks great here and definitely fits the vibe. Holy tactics, Batman. Okay, we'll finally get into the actual effectiveness of this gun, and you may be thinking, a gun that cannot kill? Quite preposterous to even entertain such a foolish idea that a weapon such as that could possibly be worthwhile. Well, that's just the thing, you verbose dipshit. While enemies that drop to 1 HP become immune to all damage from this gun, there's a few key damage sources that Gearbox seems to have forgotten about or not cared enough to limit. Namely, one that every Vault Hunter has access to, dot effects. While it itself is non-elemental, there's tons of sources of bonus elements in this game that just about any build ever is going to have access to and is likely already running. This means that when you shoot an enemy, a huge majority of the time they're going to get afflicted with a dot, which of course will kill them when it procs with the enemy at 1 HP. And there's tons of other things that make this even easier. Status effect chance, of course. R-Man Flint applies a guaranteed dot effect if you're ADS. Short Fuse is just an entirely separate damage source as is and will kill, and there's probably a hell of a lot more that I'm missing. This of course leads to the Night Flyer in normal endgame gameplay, killing easily. Surprisingly easily, in fact, as the Night Flyer actually does pump out some pretty decent damage, able to take out enemies pretty quickly as long as you're in the air getting that full auto. The second you're on the ground, this gun actually becomes worthless. You get a 2-round burst. That is 2 bullets per burst, on a burst that has a very high fire rate, which I fucking despise these super high fire rate bursts because inherently bursts have a delay between them, hence the existence of the burst fire delay stat. Unfortunately, this is a stat that is generally difficult to come by, far more difficult than fire rate at least, and when you give a burst gun that already has such a high fire rate additional fire rate bonuses, you end up locked out of firing your gun longer than you actually spend firing it, so you better either be in the air or you're just kind of shit out of luck. I have AIDS. But okay, you can jump. There's a jump button. This gun seems kind of alright, right? Sure. I do think that the Night Flyer has a bit of sauce to it. I mean, hell, it's able to kill pretty alright even on True Guardian Takedown. Except I do think that's maybe giving it a little bit too much credit. It is great compared to a lot of other guns, but I think what makes this gun kind of suck is its profoundly mid-phenotype. This gun is just an absolute failure of the Dahl lineage, and I pray that it fails to reproduce. There are currently Dahl pistols that are significantly worse, namely the AAA. But the AAA at least was once it's at the top of its game. The Night Flyer is a weapon that, at its core, tries its hardest to not kill an enemy. And while this can easily be bypassed, the Night Flyer is just a solid and consistent C tier among the rest of its Dahl pistol brethren. The base damage here is genuinely solid, but the issue is that it gets neither splash nor elemental. This pretty heavily limits what it can do, especially considering it's a comparable or lower damage than almost any of the other Dahl pistols that do get an element. It's significantly lower damage than the Hornet, and that bitch gets an element and splash. I knew Dad had a favorite. Overall though, the Night Flyer is not a bad gun by any means. It's actually pretty good and better than a lot of other options out there. But for a Dahl pistol, I'd rather use any of the other ones considering they all have a real effect instead of one that is just an attempted nerf. The Night Flyer is a gimmick gun that is only good because its gimmick sucks at functioning. But that's gonna about do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, definitely consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, all that. I will be live right after this video goes up, right here on YouTube and also over on my Twitch channel, where there will be a link to down in the description below. And just under that is a link to my Discord server where you can come and join and hang out. But with that all being said, I hope to see you guys in the next one.